Good morning everybody, thank you all very much for coming. My name is Kenneth Bannerman. I'm the Director General, the founder and leader of the Airfields of Britain Conservation Trust, which is, to all intents, the world's first national airfield charity. If you type ABCT on the internet, you'll find our 3,000 page website extremely easily. Now, in the course of running up to unveiling this memorial, we're very honoured to have one of the members of the Parish Council here who'd like to say a few words to you before helping unveil the memorial with us. And therefore may I hand over to Jason Snape.
Thank you. Good morning, thank you very much for coming today. I'm really quite honoured to have been asked to do this, not only on behalf of the Parish Council of Witham St Hughes, but also on behalf of RAF Waddington and the Royal Air Force as a whole. I think it's extremely important that we remember what happened years and years ago here at this airfield. RAF Swinderby obviously is a massive part of this village's history, and I don't think that we should be quick to forget it, and I really want to extend my gratitude to Kenneth Bannerman and the guys at ABCT for the work that they've put in and the dedication that they put in for things like this. It's extremely important. And I'd just like to say also thank you to Councillor Richard Wright from NKDC for coming down here today. Should I embarrass you by saying you used to serve at RAF Swinderby? I already have, really, haven't I? So without further ado, I'll pass you back to Mr. Bannerman, and thank you once again for turning up. Oh, and thank you to the Scouts as well, thanks guys. Great turnout.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jason. Well, you've already got that excellent history board to our left here, but just to give you a brief rundown of the airfield's history and why this all hugely matters to every one of us looking at the big picture level. The Swinderby airfield story really goes back to shortly before World War II. Now it appears it was the last of what was called the expansion period RAF airfields. These were more substantially built airfields with brick build and so on. If you take Lincolnshire as a whole, you'd place like Hemswell, where we unveiled a memorial a few years ago. These were very tremendously well made, in particular airfields during the 1930s. Now, because World War II started just shortly afterwards, there was a bit of a compromise, not least when it came to the construction of hangarage, because where normally there would have been what were called C hangars, like you see at Waddington today, for example, these brick hangars, they erected a crossover design called the J type hangar, that some of you remember, these very big hangars that had curved roofs. So eventually there were 3 of these hangars built here, as well as 3 T2 hangars, a famous World War II design. Construction took time to complete. In fact, it was still going on well after the airfield first opened in August 1940. And then, as you see in the commemorative bench here, the first 2 flying occupants were numbers 300 and 301 squadrons of the Polish Air Force. Now, it goes without saying the Poles had an absolutely atrocious time of it in the early stages of World War II, but they very gamely took the war back to the enemy as soon as the airfield opened. At the time they flew single-engine Fairey battle bombers, but they very quickly changed them to Vickers Wellingtons, which were a familiar sight at Swinderby, indeed for some years after World War II. These squadrons moved on. There were further Bomber Command squadrons here, number 50, which stayed here twice in the first half of World War II, and then also notably number 455 Squadron, an early Australian bomber unit. So they were flying Handley Page Hampden medium bombers. Now come mid-war, tail end of 1941, first half of 1942, Swinderby was to all intents closed, especially for hard runway construction. The grass runways had been taking a bit of a pounding, just simply with the weather and so on, and drainage. So once the hard runways were in place, the Swinderby's role by the end of 1942 had markedly changed from being an operational bomber station to a training one. So the main unit that was based here from October 1942 into 1946 was number 1660 Heavy Conversion Unit that flew a mixture of aircraft. Initially they flew Avro Lancasters and its predecessor, the very ill-fated Avro Manchester. That was a Lancaster look-alike, the one that was twin engine, but the engines were absolutely terrible. So this is how the Lancaster came about. But then at the end of 1943, due to certain equipment shortages with Lancaster frontline units, the Heavy Conversion Unit then switched to flying short Stirlings and carried on doing so until the start of 1945, when it switched back to solely operating Lancasters. This was an enormously busy, not to mention important, airfield here in World War II. It was absolutely jam-packed, just for a start, with personnel, really busy. And it was also a crucial part of what the RAF Bomber Command called the base system, whereby you had a parent airfield like here at Swinderby, and it in turn controlled various other airfields which were, to all intents, satellite airfields. And these included Wigsley, where that's the second Wigsley, by the way, because there was actually a World War I landing ground called that, where we've actually got one of our memorial plaques we unveiled not so long ago. That's in the village of Wigsley. And also Winthorpe, which we were hoping to unveil a memorial there yesterday, but we've had to undergo one or two slight delays there. But we will be back in this general area in the spring of next year to unveil a memorial there, like as we did just down the road from there at Balderton yesterday morning. So after the war ended, the Heavy Conversion Unit slightly unusually lasted for a little while longer, till the autumn of 1946. It then evolved through another operational training unit, and then the main unit here after World War II, once Swinderby settled into a pilot training role, was number 201 Advanced Flying School, which was here for quite a number of years. And there were one or two other flying schools as well, and this carried on until the early 1960s. Now, another big change in Swinderby's career occurred in 1964, when flying didn't stop, but it was then regarded as more secondary, and this was to do with recruit training. So through a couple of changes of name, Swinderby played maybe even its most important role of all, one could argue, from the mid-1960s until it eventually closed in 1993 for recruit training. All recruits came through here eventually, and so this played a phenomenally important part in the ongoing development of the RAF. Now, eventually at the end of 1993, the airfield finally closed. I was here incidentally, certainly around about 1984, when the airfield was still fully around. But as you know, there have been a lot of developments since then. You've got Witham St Hughes, you've got the industrial estate. There has been a lot of demolition one way and another, but this place still is not only hugely relevant, but it just matters, and it always will. But that's the case with all of Britain's airfields, whether they are active or disused. We simply cannot survive in our everyday lives without these places. Jobs, facilities, services, you name it. It might not be immediately obvious, but we just rely upon our airfields in everyday communications, transport, even our health. That's how important these places are. So all we just simply say to people is that within reason, do all you reasonably possibly can to help support our airfields, active and disused, and of course not forgetting all the personnel and their families who've either served at or been associated with our airfields going right back to 1909. Because just by helping them, you're helping yourselves. It's that simple. And therefore we are really pleased and honoured to be unveiling what is now ABCT's 154th memorial And we will be back in this general area before not too long. In this case, to yet another of Britain's absolutely unique and priceless assets, in this case, the one and only Swinderby Airfield. Thank you all very much. Now, may I just, before we effectively conclude proceedings, may I all just ask you please to observe a 2-minute silence to Swinderby Airfield and all the personnel and their families who've either served or been associated with here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.